Finally, at long last, and after much hullabaloo, the Kerry Lugar Bill has been signed by the US President. But does that mean that the debate here in Pakistan is over? Well, the short answer is no.
Have not been done properly and they need to be renegotiated.
The Kerry Lugar Bill does not say that the government of Pakistan is placed under any conditionalities.
हुकूमत ने कैरी लुगर जो बिल है उस पर हमसे ना तो कोई तबादला ख्याल किया, डिस्कशन किया.
The manner in which these conditionalities have been enforced, whether it meets the requirements of Pakistan's dignity.
So to the extent that we're going to the Americans and asking for money desperately, it's going to come with conditions. There's no free money here.
Pakistan's very existence as a sovereign state is at risk. Or at least that's what certain politicians and media analysts would have us believe. But what exactly is sovereignty in the first place? The textbook definition of sovereignty is having absolute authority within a given territory. But if that's the criteria, Pakistan is not a sovereign state. Since 2004, drone strikes have rained down on Pakistani territory without pause. Initially, they were denied outright and then condemned as the leaks and sheer volume of proof became too great to deny. And now there's no longer any doubt that not only are the strikes winked at by the Pakistani establishment, but that the drones themselves, as conveniently leaked by US Senator Feinstein and reported here by Fox News, take off from Pakistan itself.
Holbrooke in Pakistan ran into considerable concern about the use of the Predator strikes in the Fatah area of Pakistan, and yet, as I understand it, these are flown out of a Pakistani base.
That little tidbit sparked the usual round of denial and outrage here in Pakistan. And while it is true that this may have been the first time Pakistani soil was used for strikes on Pakistani soil, it is not, however, the first time that a foreign base has been built in Pakistani territory.
Rewind back to the 1950s. The world is reeling from a world war, only to get mired in a conflict between two superpowers. The objective of each is simple: total global domination. The means to that end, whatever it takes. During the Cold War, alliances became a necessary tool used by the US to combat the Soviet threat. And when the subcontinent partition took place, a sovereign India and a sovereign Pakistan were there for the taking. To impose its control in the region, the US went through a pactomania phase in the form of SEATO and CENTO. Of course, Pakistan was quite willing to pen its signature on the paper, providing land and resources to the US under the patronage of these pacts. Another blot in the glow of Pakistan's sovereignty was the contentious communications agreement with the US. Following that, General Ayub permitted the US to establish its first secret military base on Pakistani soil. Badaber, near Peshawar to be specific. Pakistani territory was used by the US military to actively spy on the Soviet Union. Observation missions from Pamir into the Soviet Union became common. The existence of this base was acknowledged only after the Soviets shot down the Francis Gehry Powers piloted U-2 spy plane. Interestingly enough, some analysts profess the idea of drone technology was triggered by this incident. The degree of secrecy had to be maintained at all costs. When then Foreign Minister Zede Bhutto asked to visit the base, the response was far from welcoming. He was invited to visit the cafeteria and indulge in coffee and sandwiches, but that was it. Of course, the existence of this base did not fare well with the Soviets, and a reaction was inevitable. In a symbolic gesture, the Soviet head of state, Nikita Khrushchev, drew a red circle around the map of Peshawar, the next target to face the wrath of the Russians. Ayub, sensing Pakistan was left lying alone in the bed the US had made, ordered the base to be closed. A disturbed Lyndon Johnson then wrote to Ayub, giving him 3.5 billion reasons to reopen the base, $3.5 billion worth of aid that the US had given to Pakistan. Pakistan's inappropriateness seemed unacceptable to the US. Mutual interests were at risk. Now, recognizing the excessive use of the term sovereignty these days, it seems history has a response to these concerns. We just need to take a closer look. Yasir Ahmed, DawnNews.
So, as you've seen, in terms of physical control over our territory, well, we haven't been sovereign since at least the 1950s. And let's not also disregard all the many groups and individuals who have established virtual fiefdoms where the state has no sway, often with disastrous consequences for the rest of us. The sovereignty argument is thus a weak one. Having laid that to rest, let's now turn to aid. And first, let's wrap our minds around the fact that there are no free lunches, and also that there is no such thing as unconditional foreign aid. Aid is, and always has been, just another arm of foreign policy. And when it comes to aid from the United States, interest will always trump ideology, and realpolitik will always beat rhetoric. That's precisely why, even though General Zia-ul-Haq had judicially murdered a democratically elected Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the dollars kept flowing. Because in 1979, the Cold War turned hot. And as Soviet columns rolled into Afghanistan, unprecedented amounts of US dollars, about 6 billion of them, rolled into Pakistan. This was, of course, despite the fact that the Symington Amendment banned aid to countries actively enriching nuclear equipment, as Pakistan was clearly doing at Kahuta. But then the Cold War ended and the Berlin Wall fell. And once a civilian government was in place in Islamabad, the US suddenly realized that Pakistan needed to be sanctioned for its nuclear program. And thus, the Pakistan-specific Pressler Amendment was used to devastating effect. In 1998, Nawaz Sharif's government tested nuclear devices, for which another round of sanctions were imposed. And then General Musharraf was sanctioned for, well, staging a coup. But once again, Afghanistan came to the rescue of yet another military dictator. With 9/11 once again making Pakistan the most allied ally of the United States, all sanctions and restrictions were waived by the US in its own national interest. The US Congress allowed President Bush to waive the standing prohibition on aiding governments installed by coups, and in addition, Pakistan received over $1.5 billion in US aid in both 2002 and 2003. In June 2003, Bush announced he would back a further $3 billion aid package for Pakistan meant for 2005. All these also came with strings and conditions, and they were far more stringent than the ones we see today in the Kerry Lugar Bill. And we'll be comparing those conditions, both past and present, right after this break.